Hi everyone, I am Helen Kelly. I'm with Wayne County Human Services and I work out in the Pocono Rab. And today I just want to take a couple of minutes, hopefully less than 10, to show you how to make sense of the community queue and really utilize the filters and the sorting mechanism so that you see how to access the information that you need to serve those who need the help the most and fill your beds and vacancies in the quickest way possible. So I'm going to start up here with service needs. This is the first way you could drill down. It's here, although depending on what you're using it for, I'd actually caution you against using it too much or relying too much on it. It's certainly good for the emergency shelter providers. They can see, you'll see over here, if someone is looking for shelter or not. Chances are that shelter provider received a referral for a person at some point. Maybe their beds were full at that time and they had to deny that referral. Well, if that person is still looking for shelter when a vacancy pops up, they would be on here if they were homeless at the time, and you would be able to see who still needs a shelter placement. So that works great to that end. Where it gets a little tricky is for RRH and permanent supportive, because if a permanent supportive provider only filters down to that, they are going to see the people that are appropriate at that level of care, but they might be missing out on someone with that chronic designation, which we know we need for a bulk of the PSH beds within our COC. So I'd encourage you not to just filter that way. If your queue is a manageable enough size, I would just kind of encourage you to leave that open. Same thing with rapid rehousing. You might have enough funding available to serve a higher acuity, especially if you don't have anyone enrolling in your program right now at this time. So if you had the means and the ability to do so, you could serve up. And I just had wanted to kind of point that out, that you would miss out on those populations if you just looked strictly at your own service type. So we're going to leave that empty for now. Available zone and available county. This speaks to the location where the person is willing to move to, not necessarily where they currently are, although obviously those could be one and the same. So let's say someone in the Lehigh Valley decided that they have maybe burned some bridges, they exhausted their options there, they're willing to move to Monroe County, which is in Zone 9, and see what's available for them there. That would be indicated when they were talking with the specialist, and then when anyone from Zone 9 or Monroe County went on, they would be able to see then that that person is populated on their queue and is willing to be served by them potentially. Okay, and the way the zones work, basically our COC is divided into 33 counties. Those 33 counties are divided into 5 RABs. Each of those RABs either have their own zone or are subdivided into other zones depending on the geography, size, makeup, composition of that zone and what made sense for them. Okay, so those were decisions that were made at the RAB level of what would work for them. If you aren't sure what zone you are in, actually, I will just take you very briefly to where you could find that information. Let's see. Nope, not there. Sorry. Yep. Okay, PennsylvaniaCoc.org/connect to home. As you go down, you'll be able to see different resources that are available to you for coordinated entry. And one of those is the Referral Zone Map, which you see right here. You'll be able to identify the county you're in and then which zone that corresponds to. Okay. Okay, so from there's different subpopulations that we can look for. These are informed either by demographic data that was taken during their initial assessment or information provided on the VI SPDAT, or just straight out questions that were added on to the end of the VI-SPA app. So we can drill down and look for veterans, youth, chronic homeless, DV, mental health diagnosis, physical health issues, substance abuse issues. Now, since all of this typically is self-reported, there is some due diligence on the side of the provider who's receiving that referral or accepting that service to make sure that that person truly is chronic, that they have that disability or that history of homelessness. These are just kind of meant to be starting points where, based on the answers that they provided, it would seem to be that they would fall into each of these categories, which some of us may need to fill our beds. It's not a guarantee that, yeah, the person with the mental health diagnosis on the queue actually has one. To that person, maybe they just went to therapy once or twice, and so they said they have a diagnosis. We know as providers that's very different, when we're trying to put someone in an MH designated bed. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. But those filters are there, and it's a great starting point to try and fill those designated spots. Okay, also on the search is active or historical. Active is anyone that's currently looking for permanent housing options within the COC. Historical would be people that have been placed, they've been closed out either because they weren't homeless anymore, they self-resolved, whatever the case may be. I do want to point out that if you drill down to domestic violence, you're not going to see a whole lot of information for them. There's a DV protocol in place for our HMIS system, and it kind of blocks any identifying information. So you're not going to see their name, you're not going to see their phone number, you're not, basically any of that identifying information you're not going to be able to see. But if you go to their queue record, this is blank. This is just the training environment. Yours would not really look like this per se with the empty spots, but you can see their case manager. You could see their contact phone number, contact email, because you would be communicating with them via whatever case manager they were assigned to at the shelter or wherever else. Okay, if you end up communicating with that client directly after that initial meeting or after your intake and you open them with services, obviously, you can do whatever makes sense for you, but for the purposes of coordinated entry and protecting their information within HMIS, this is how communications will transpire with DV clients, within this system. And if you need to search for them, but they don't remember their HMIS ID, they now can have their own created ID or password. So that's a way that you could drill down and search for a specific person. If, let's say, the shelter calls and they want to talk to you, or you call the shelter and want to talk about a specific client, maybe like this, you have 5, 6, 8 or so DV clients. They don't know what their HMIS ID number is. If you have that password or ID, that will help you keep straight of who you're talking about. Okay. So I'm going to remove that filter. Okay, so we talked, each of these up here do correspond with a column down here. They can be sorted by ascending or descending. The only other sorting that I didn't talk about yet, but it's really important, is the status and the last intake note date. There's another column. It's not in the training environment, but it is on your community queue. It would be last intake note taken by. So as you're going on and you're trying to sort through who do I need to focus on first, there's a couple of things. You can look to see who hasn't had a note in a while. So that could potentially indicate that a message was left for someone 2 or 3 weeks ago, but nothing has transpired since then. So it might make sense, or it would be strongly encouraged to reach out to that person again and establish that contact. Status. This will say either new, reviewed, engaging, or verifying, each of them speaking to a different level of involvement with a provider. Generally, if someone is engaging or verifying, I know that they're taken care of, at least for the time being, by another provider. I don't need to be reaching out at that time. I'm going to want to be focusing on the new clients that pop up as well as the reviewed. Because if someone is reviewed, and they haven't transitioned over to that engaging status yet, chances are a provider looked at that client and then realized for whatever reason they were not eligible for their programs. Is something that happens a lot. So that would be documented. You'd be able to see that history in the notes, but then obviously that person still needs attention by another permanent housing provider. So if you do look at the reviewed, that gives you a chance then of switching it from reviewed to engaging, because now you're engaging with that client. Okay. Trying to think. Oh, and then also that other column that's not here, but that's important, is last intake note by. As you're on it, you'll get very familiar with the names. You will know the names of the people in your own region that are doing notes, but you'll also get to know the names of the call specialists, or the specialists at the call center and the access sites. If you go on and you see that the last note was by one of those specialists, that will probably prompt that an action is needed on the provider side to try and address something with that client, either because they're new or their situation changed or whatever the case may be. So that would be another trigger for you to go in and check and see what's going on with that person. Okay. Aside from that, as we're going down, if we sort by, let's say, SPDAT score, and we start then filling our beds from the highest acuity going down, systematically, that's kind of the approach that the COC has taken. That's kind of how you would go about filling your beds and filtering down the different types of information on the queue so that you could pull from what you want and serve those with the greatest need first, while also filling your beds. Okay, so I hope that this was helpful for you. There will be additional trainings on making those status changes and doing notes and service acceptance and stuff like that. Okay, so have a great day, everyone.